This is Echoes of Our Community. You are welcome to this wonderful program, a program where we connect real stories to genuine minds, where we look at issues that impact on our communities, where every corner of our communities comes together to motivate, educate, and engage. And today I have with me a wonderful set of people. I am your host, Margaret Jimmy Taribo, and I have with me Elio Ajiboye. Hello. You're welcome. I have with me Dr. Pelumi Obasaju. You're welcome. I have Mr. Joel Dunn, and I have Mr. Davlan
Driscoll.
Driscoll.
Oh, yeah.
Because that name is what I always try to. So you're welcome. Before we go ahead today, I just want to say, how have we been really? I'm going to start with you, Davlan.
Yeah, it's been a good week. Quite productive, sun is shining, can't complain.
We didn't shine today, really, did
Yeah,
we?
not today, but we'll thank God for the rest of the 6 days. It's been alright.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I've had a good week. Start of the second quarter. So I guess that for me is a good chance to reflect on what's happened in the first 3 months of the year, and to get into my flow for what happened next. So I like to take those quarters as a chance to reflect and plan ahead. So yeah, I've been in preparation and reflection mode in the last week.
Lovely. That's nice to hear. Elio, how's yours been?
Yeah, this week has been intense, interesting. Again, like Joel, just recognizing it is the second quarter, reflecting on what I've done so far. And again, it's still a season of planning and developing. So yeah, it's been
I
good.
can imagine. Yeah, I know how hard you are working. Yeah, Belumi, how's yours been?
It's been good. It was my birthday on Tuesday.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday!
The way you're saying that, as if you're surprised.
I did remember, but then I didn't remember, so I've got to say it. Oh yes, that's true. So,
Yeah, it was my birthday on Tuesday, so new age. Yeah, it's been a good week. Yeah.
happy birthday once
Thank
again.
you.
Happy
Thank
birthday.
And based on how you've been about your birthday, anything about to reflect on?
I'm just grateful for life. I was weirdly emotional. I've never been that emotional before, but yeah, it's good. Yeah. Still reflecting, as you can tell, but yeah, good.
Yeah. And for me, it's been reflection. But it's been busy because it's been half term and we have the holidays to do with young people. But I think on reflection, it's getting better and better, and I think that's fulfilling for me when I see parents and young people coming together. And for me, even looking at our young people's hub and see them being passionate about their volunteering has been wonderful. So yeah, that's been good. So we're ready to go, isn't it? So we're going to be looking at the topic today. It's a wait for this. It's looking at prison, and do you deserve to go to prison? Who wants to talk about that? How do you feel about that? This prison thing. Sometimes talking about it from a cultural perspective scares me a bit. But I know that and then sometimes I think it's something that it's been hidden underneath, that it's like a taboo kind of thing. And when it happens, we all hide. It's the stigma, the shame, the pain. I back home in Africa when I was growing up, I think the first time not me personally, but people that I've known, and I've had to go to the police station, and for me, I felt so bad. We live in this big compound, and then there was a big fight. I wasn't even there. I went to visit my aunts, and then I came in, and then there was this big fight going on, and we all had to report to the police station. Going to that police station alone gave me anxiety, and then having people that have been in prison also gave me anxiety as well, and because of the way it was and the way it is. And I do have somebody that works in the prison service, and I hear stories every time. So it's something that is scary, but I think it's something that is important to explore, and that's what we're doing today. So are we ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it should be recognised that there is a possibility that you might take a visit to the little jailhouse if you're not behaving yourself. And that could be for various reasons. That could be because you have friends and you're out and about, and those friends are a bit light fingered, and you're not conscious of that, and then you find that you're all gathered together to take a walk to the local police station.
Even if it's for a night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not something I've experienced personally, but I've worked within the prison system in as much as I've done what we call prison ministry work. So and at the time, I think I was sharing earlier on, I was part of a church that had a prison ministry outreach. And what we did, or what I did at that time, was to start up a letter writing group, because there were a number of women in a prison, a ladies' prison, a woman's prison, whom came into the country thinking that they were coming to work, and actually they were sex trafficked. And the stigma of the fact that they were in prison now, they couldn't tell their families. They just kept letting people know that if they let anybody know on the outside, it's just to tell their families back home that they're okay, they're working, they're doing well, but actually they were in prison. And so that affected their mental health and well-being, obviously. And just to have somebody that was communicating with them regularly
It can be such a
lifted their
very
spirits, yeah.
traumatic. And going back to that point about tell them at home that I'm okay. So not everybody knows about it.
No, they don't, because they've literally come in. They've been told that they're back home, that they're going to be working in the UK, and they didn't know that the job wasn't the job that they were told. They were being sex trafficked. So it wasn't until they got here that they
That's
realised.
interesting. We're going to be speaking to Joel this evening, and I hope we're going to be able to at least glean a lot and have that conversation about your experience. And I want to say thank you for coming tonight, because it's been about being real. Like we said, it's about a real story that brings about that element of truth that people need to hear. And yeah, especially for our young people and also as parents as well.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the easiest way I can explain my prison experience was I stood out like a sore thumb for reasons that to me I just took for granted or were normal for me until I was in that environment. So I was the fact that I'd never been to prison before, the fact I'd completed compulsory education, the fact that I have supportive friends and family, all of these things made me stand out from the people that were around me. I remember vividly the day that I got sentenced. I got sentenced in Leeds, so all of my family had travelled up to go to Leeds, and I was the last case of the day. And my barrister advised me, I would suggest that it's the end of the day. The judge is going to be tired, whatever. We don't want to take the risk on his mood. Let's just, we can ask for it to be adjourned for another day or whatever. And I remember feeling very strongly that my family have come. I don't want to make them make this trip again. And I was in this long period of being on bail and waiting for my sentencing. And I knew I was going to prison, and it felt like purgatory. That was a horrible experience, waiting for the inevitable. So I said, no, let's go against my barrister's decision. And I ended up getting a sentence which was much more lenient than what was expected. And from that first part, from being led down to the cell, and that meant all the other people that were waiting to go to prison had been there, some of them from the morning, right? So I was the last one, and we got onto the prison bus, and this guy came on, and they was questioning the guy because they saying, is he a paedophile? Do they think he's a paedophile? So everybody on the bus started rocking
they
the
were
bus.
asking about you from each other.
So and I guess it's like those kind of codes of practice or norms that I wouldn't be privy to because I've never been in that experience. But then it's almost like, what you done, mate? What you done? Everyone was asking everybody. But there was this one guy who came on separate to everybody else with more security, whatever, and that was the accusation that he's a paedophile. So everybody on the bus, you're in this like really small, almost like a phone box. Yeah, everybody's in that, and you can see out of the window of them, and everybody's all locked up in there. And they started trying to rock the bus to make it tip, to make it tip so that they could get to the guy. So this was my first experience.
Wow, you must have been scared.
Yeah. So I literally was with my fists clenched, thinking I haven't even got to the prison yet, and these guys are trying to rock the bus over so that everyone has to get unlocked and we can have a fight. That was literally the narrative. And then when we got to the holding cell, again, I was so on edge because I think I'd had a long time to prepare myself that I was going into prison, but I didn't fully know what I was preparing myself for. So this was the first experience with all of the chaos of what was going on in that moment. When we got off, we was in the holding cell, and everybody was taking stuff out of places, and there was like an amnesty bin. This was your last chance to put your stuff there. But almost everybody on that bus had something on them, and they was either taking it or putting it somewhere even more discreet where it wouldn't be found. And they was asking me, "What have you got?" And to me, I was just like this. I was sat like this. I remember I sat tense because I don't know who is who, how I should be responding. And that pretty much was how I was for the first 3 days, because then you go through this, like, you go to an induction wing, and that is chaotic because there's a transient population within that induction wing. So a lot of handing over of stuff, a lot of people moving in and out, and I really said to myself, I'm going to keep myself to myself. I don't want to engage with anybody. But I soon learned that that was not going to be the best way to.
Why is that not the best way? Because I thought that if I'd like to keep to myself because I don't want trouble, So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 6'3" and covered in tattoos. So, and I was also a Londoner in a jail in Leeds. So I stuck out like a sore thumb for obvious reasons. Anyway, I'm not really ever been much of a blending in person. Even though my character is, despite my image, my character is to more take a backseat. That's how I am. But I think in this environment, actually, one of the first places that I found some sort of belonging was in the church. And I went to the church, and that was, I guess, where there was some familiarity with what was going on. But it was very clear for me from the beginning about, that for those reasons I explained, that I stood out like a sore thumb, because I didn't know what to do. And everybody around me, they had been in prison before. And I think, to wrap it all the way of when I left prison, that experience gave me a desire to, and gave me a real heart to serve other people, because I became acutely aware of the privileges that I had. And that word can often make people feel uncomfortable, but it's important that we acknowledge the ways in which we're privileged.
I think we should, because, and that's where the question comes in: who deserves to go? Do we do all do? Yeah, that question is.
I mean, there's a saying in prison: do the crime, do the time. There's an acknowledgement from most people in prison that they deserve to be there. They did a crime, unless they're innocent, I guess. But there's an acknowledgement that the attitude that you should have is you're here for a reason, and serve your time. So for me, my crime was not a victimless crime. I was in for assault, so I definitely deserve to be there. And I acknowledge that, and I think that's an important part of my journey in there. Unless I made that acknowledgement and accepted my faults and my shortcomings, then I would be unable to use that time as a healing space, as a progressive space. So for me, that was the very first thing, and something that I had acknowledged and accepted and worked through before I even got there.
I see Devlin nodding his head. You
No, I'm just, yeah.
So yeah, must have something to respond to what Joel's.
No, first of all, thank you for sharing your story. It's powerful, man. I don't know, my opinions regarding jail is very mixed.
Talk to us.
I mean, coming from a background like mine, growing up, you think that, if you envision someone that's in the army, you know how they got badges of honor. Going to jail is like a badge of honor. That's what we grew up thinking.
Wow.
Yeah. Like,
Wow.
you actually can't even wait, because you want to show that, I can belong in the jungle, if that makes sense. Like, as a kid, that was the mindset,
But for some people that did have that mindset, if they went and they came out, would they still have that mindset, or do they still wear it as a badge of honor?
I remember when one of my first ever friends went to jail, and when he came out, I was just like, this guy's different. He's on a different level to the rest of us. Like, he's seen something that we haven't seen. So it's like, until you do that as well, then, you know, there's a bit of a disparity, you know. But again, it just goes down to conditioning. And I feel like with regards to jail, another thing that people need to consider as well is our schooling systems. You know, I feel like we're actually conditioned way before jail ever occurs in most cases.
I agree.
You know, things like isolation. It
Detention,
yeah,
exclusion.
it preps the mind for these things that are to come. You know, so. But, you know, and again, I said mixed emotion because at this point, you know, I kind of avoid talking about jail, things like that. And to your original question, does anyone deserve to go to jail? I don't know. I don't think anyone here can be the judge of that. I always say to people, jail is only one decision away. One bad decision.
100%.
Like,
100%.
you can avoid jail for 25 years and on your 26th year go to jail. You understand?
Even people that think
One bad decision away.
and you do see people like that. Mine was an assault on a night out, which was a fight and interaction, right? Some people one punch and they end up going to prison. They go to prison for life or manslaughter, you know. And I think you might have a little bit of road rage or whatever, or something might happen, and the way that you could have even acted in the past, the consequences could have meant there was no repercussion. But then for somebody else in that same situation, I think, you know, it's reductionist to think of the prison experience as other, because you know, especially in the circumstances we're living in, you know, people are desperate. You know, we're living in a time where people are really struggling.
Yes.
You know, where normal people are shoplifting just to put food on the table for their children, you know. And I think it's easy to look down your nose at, oh, people have been to prison and whatever. And of course, I think in some ways, rightly so, there's a stigma around it, right?
Yeah.
But I think we shouldn't look on it as it's something so far removed.
And I think that's what we're here to talk about, because sometimes that is the issue we have, and whereby that's where people shy away, and the stigma, like, I don't want anybody to hear, I don't want anybody to, but it's the reality.
There's so much normal people in jail. Do you know that? There's so much normal people in jail that have lived normal lives. And again, it's just one thing, you get caught. That's it.
It would shock you that you just the profile of the person you think is in prison exists in prison, but also there's people that you would never, you'd walk past them and think, what on earth could have they done to be in there? Because they just look, again, like a
you could meet like a teacher, someone that's, you know, been a professional for 20 years, and he's had in the spur moment, like, he's just done something
crazy.
Yeah, jail.
Yeah, I think something you said about prison being a badge of honor. I heard something the other day, and it was about someone working within the criminal justice space saying that the youngers say, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
What does that mean?
I'd rather be judged by the jury of 12 people
than
than
carried by 6
as if in a coffin. And that is scary. And I'm not saying that that's across the board, but some youngers see that, you know, it's that cheap life type of, you know, I kill somebody and I'm under the age of 18, I'll be out in my 20s. That's literally part of that narrative, which is scary. And I think for me, I've been into youth offenders institutes and done work in youth offenders institutes, but I went to a male prison, adult prison. I would have never wanted to be in a young offenders institute, because that is, you know, I feel like in a men's prison, there's kind of like a pecking order and an expectation of how things should be. For example, if someone littered on the floor, like, this is our house, pick that up, you know, there's a pecking order of power, just like how there is in society, you know, things kind of work themselves out. Whereas in young offenders institutes, it's like every man for himself, and you know, the alarms constantly going off. I think one of the big things that concerns me with young offenders institutes is how many children put themselves, because they are children, right? That's the important thing to acknowledge. Put themselves on single unlock.
What does single unlock mean?
Which basically means they've expressed that they fear for their life, So the prison puts them on single unlock, which means that they can only come out of their cell when they have one-to-one supervision with a prison member of staff. I know, for example, Feltham had so many people on single unlock that it practically crippled the jail because they can't do that. So what you have is a whole cohort of young people who are essentially living under the circumstances of solitary confinement, which human rights law dictate can only happen for a limited period of time. But some of these young people have experienced almost their whole sentence, and then they go back into the community, and we expect them to be normal citizens. And I think for me, the actually the Young Offenders Institute conversation about prison and the effects and harm that does to the young person and subsequently to society and to family and all the people they engage with is a very different conversation to what happens as an adult when you go into prison.
Can we go back to what you were saying, Devlin, where you said that the practice of prison is done much earlier? I'm an education strategist, as you know, and I concurred with what you were saying in school, that as soon as you come from primary school into secondary school, this attitude of this punitive attitude where there is no grace, there's no leeway to make a mistake and give you a warning, but you're automatically sent into isolation, automatically sent into detention. How do you think those children that are experiencing that know that they're practicing prison tactics, so to speak?
As after.
Okay.
You realize it after. Once you come out of the school system, or maybe you find yourself in trouble, or maybe you might even grow older and find yourself in a reflective state, then you start to look at, you start thinking like, whoa, why am I the way I am? You start looking at what shapes you. In essence, these things, they desensitize you. That's what it does. You don't feel any way staying in a confined environment a whole day, 2 days, 3 days.
I think the scary thing is some schools impose these conditions subconsciously. Like we've adopted in the UK pedagogies and principles and practices that oppress and punish people, and we know that always ends up disproportionately being people from marginalized backgrounds, right? And when we look at where some of these policies, like zero tolerance policies, come from, they were in response to mass shootings in American schools. So some of the things that we've inherited from our American cousins as good practice, having the over surveillance in schools, police presence in schools, if we're adopting them from them, we should also look at how they affected those schools. There's enough research and evidence that shows us they had an adverse effect across the board, whether it's on academic outputs, social outputs, how they engage with their peers, how they engage with the teachers. There's a whole body of evidence that suggests that, yet here we find ourselves adopting those zero tolerance policies and these type of like high punishment environments as if there's something that is, part of a utopia sense of education.
That's education, but let's even about parents as well. I remember one of one of our previous podcasts we were speaking about, you want to punish your child, you say, okay, you're going to take away your PlayStation for a year or for a week and things like that. Is that part?
Eventually, you just stop feeling the pain, and that goes back to what I was saying about the desensitization. And I'm happy you brought up that point, because it's the same kind of thing with isolation. Isolation turns into jail, and then you're putting back these people in society that are no longer afraid of jail. You understand? They have nothing to lose now. They're gonna struggle to get jobs anyway. I mean, there's in this country, you got graduates struggling to get jobs. Yeah, alone someone that's coming out of jail. Like, the path is increasingly harder for them. So that's why reoffending rates are so high, because they're focusing on like disciplinary measures, but there's lack of reform.
Prison doesn't rehabilitate.
You understand? So yeah, like, you're just putting people that have not been reformed back into society and expecting a change, when really you're placing them back there worse than they went in. And you see it all the time.
When we've not heard from you.
Sorry, I'm getting quite emotional. I think just in response, the question is, what is the role of prison? Is it to rehabilitate? Is it to reform? Or is it simply to punish in a way that profits the nation? Because there are different practices in the prison service that get me emotional, get me upset. And it's slipping my mind. Sorry, I'm getting very emotional for different reasons. Slipping my mind, but there was a documentary by Ava DuVernay about the prison system, the prison matrix, but it was in America. But like you said, we've adopted quite a bit. I like to say that America's our louder sibling, not cousin. I think there are a lot of things that the UK has done that are quite hidden. But going back to the thing on what's the role of prison, I also know people who work in the prison system, but more on a therapeutic and psychotherapy point of view. And also, you mentioned finding community in the church, in prison. And I think prison ministries, therapeutic spaces, and different community outreach programs are the response of those who have been impacted in one way or another by the prison system, recognizing that we're not actually, there are no systems or things in place to reform or rehabilitate people. And if we really want them to rejoin society, understand that you are welcome back into the space of society. My English is going all over the place because I feel like I'm about to cry. But also it's going back to the role and the job of the police. Because is it a thing of you're part of a community and you're there to foster a community that trusts you, and they're not
But there's
there
no
to-
trust
there's no
anyway.
trust.
There's no trust. And sorry, going back to your point, because I know of somebody that there was an outreach project that went into prison, but because they didn't conform to the way the prison wanted in reaching, they were banned or they were pushed to that they can't come back, and they stopped them from coming. And we've been trying to speak really, because they were, and they were making a good impact. They were actually a Christian ministry to reach these, these offenders in prison, and they were doing a good job. But I think they mistakenly did something, but they were not given another chance to go in there. And what is that? How can that impact? They're doing a good job. So even if there's maybe you go, that's not a policy here, but but they were not even given a second chance.
Can I just jump in? There was something that you said in terms of if you've done the crime, you do the time, right? I think once people have acknowledged I'm here for a reason, that's when change can happen, right? I'm not being overly sensitive or overly poetic. Like there are people who need to be there, safety, all of that. But once people have acknowledged I've done something and I'm here for a reason, I think there needs to be avenues of change and seeing them as human beings. Part of my issue with the prison system is we are quick to demonize people and not recognize the histories or the things that have led to that point, especially on an emotional level, especially in terms of trauma that has led to that point, especially in terms of conditioning behaviorally in different spaces. The stats in terms of those who are in prison and the representation in society are shocking. But then what has led to that point? What has led to people committing crimes? These everyday people that can't put food on the table, what policies are in place or are stopping them from actually being seen as human outside first before it leads to them committing the crime?
We were on a program last year. It was one of the programs. You had a conference, and remember somebody coming to speak about a child that has mental health, especially he didn't have his diagnosis, and they tried to fight his corner to get a diagnosis where he had ADHD and autism, and it wasn't done until he actually killed somebody. And he only got his diagnosis when he went into prison. So that could have been stopped. That could have been prevented. And that's one of the reasons why we're saying that this, yes, he does, but if we could, like, I'm bringing that from that point that you said that, where's the history? What are the things that have led to that point? What are the schools doing?
The systems don't want to connect the history. Everything is very compartmentalized conveniently. So then by the time you do get to the prison system, because that's not the only system that exists, when you're even trying to use that, depending on your ethnic background, depending on your background in general, that may or may not help you. But everything is compartmentalized. Nobody sits down and thinks, well, yeah, as you said, let's take a reflective look. Not to say that even if you reflected and saw that there was trauma, that it excuses the behavior, because it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
It shouldn't, and under any circumstance, as we knew, one child recently was trying to use autism as the reason why he killed.
Is that the one that
That he stabbed her in
the neck?
the neck? I'm not too sure if I should mention the name, so that's why I'm not mentioning names. And he wanted to use the autism as his reasonable excuse, but it was clear, if you're already walking out with a knife anyway, you know what would autism do to deter that? Do you understand what I'm saying? But the systems are always stacked against, especially within our community anyway, even though statistically it is white males that are majority prosecuted and in jail for the crimes.
Are we?
But
Is that-
yeah, but it's
Yeah,
because
but
of
if
the
you're
fact
looking at
that
the numbers,
no, but
that only
I'm getting
okay.
to that. So statistically, in terms of the populace, because we are not the majority, the figures for white white males are higher than those of black males. But when you look at our populace, we're still more than half because of our numbers. Do you understand what I'm saying? But it's just to say that actually, in terms of our global figures, we're not higher than our white counterparts. But what happens, as I
But we're
said,
high
from the
enough.
school,
Yeah.
well, it is, because if you're only 5% and half of 5%, I'm just giving it as an example, half of 5% is already in jail, then it is high.
It's
Do you
a problem.
understand? It's a
That's a
problem.
big problem. Yeah.
And you know, systems such as with the current government taking away benefits and things, you cause people to be desperate. We have this saying back home that, you know, the things that you restrict from a child, do you understand? If you keep restricting it, you force them to want to get it somewhere else. And that could include them stealing. So you don't restrict it, you give them, but you give them in a measured way, whatever it is you're giving. But these systems, it's always having you at a stranglehold all the time. So everybody, or most people, those people that you say are normal people, are always acting from a place of desperation, not reaction because, you know, they're fighting, defending themselves or something like that. And it's hard. And as Devlin said, you know, in school, when a child does something, I remember my daughter, I always use her as an example, you know, in school, she was going to get a detention for something. I asked her what the situation was. She explained to me, and it didn't quite make sense. So I was asking the school about it, and they said she still had to serve the detention. And I said, no, she's not serving nothing. You do your due diligence, you investigate and be righteous judges. And those were the exact words that I used. And then later on, they then wrote back to me and said that they, on this occasion, they're not. And I said, it wasn't a this occasion. You knew that you couldn't find what was necessary. Do you understand what I mean?
Can I just say, piggybacking off your point, yeah? I just want to bring up how much people that have been convicted and that are in jail, but they're wrongfully there.
That's what that's
Wrongfully, like
and
there's
that's
loads of people that are in jail serving sentences, whether small or big, and they did not commit the crime. But it just is what it is now.
It is what it is. You know what? We're going to come back for another part of this session, and we want to look at, is there hope for us really? And that's what we. So just to round up this segment, I just want to hear the last point from everyone to say, do we deserve it? Do you deserve it? Do we deserve to go to break? You've said it anyway, but
Let God be the judge.
yeah, God be the judge.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think if you've done the crime, then if you've done a crime that, you know, deserves for you to be in prison, then it makes sense. I think the key is around that punishment piece. The punishment is losing your freedom. The other part of the job of what a prison should be doing is rehabilitation. So for me, that's the big part is, are we punishing people and, like you said, further driving them into destitute situations? And that's where I think the real moral battle around what is prison right and who is it right for.
Thank you so much. Bellamy?
What are the roles of prisons?
What are the rules of prisons? Interesting. That is massive. Elia?
For me, it's echoing what Joel said, that there's sometimes, again, and also what Belume said, looking at the history of the person, because prison may not always be the answer for that particular person. And again, if you're looking from a rehabilitative perspective, then you have to look at each individual. Yeah.
Which is the cost of money, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, well, you've heard us on this segment of Echoes of Our Community. We'll be back for a part 2. So watch the space. See you next time. And that's one of the things I want to end with. I wrote a book, and in that book, I realized that I just remember now that one of the children, he had an issue. He was struggling in terms of how he was going to take care of his mom. He had good friends in school, but he got into trouble because he wanted to take care of his mom, and that got him into trouble where he was groomed and he was excluded from school. And you could imagine what the result of that was. So if you need to get my book, Can You Hear Me? And that looks at cultural conflict for young people and being heard in a society where they feel unheard. So I'll see you next time on Echoes of Our Community. Watch this space. Thank you.